All right, well, as the SPAC boom continues, we are finally starting to see more companies come public via the SPAC channel that have a real business. They are not only growing revenues, but they are also making profits and growing those profits. One of those companies is Bowlero, and the company's president and CFO, Brett Parker, joins us now to talk through the state of the business and sort of how you guys see things going forward. So, Brett, let's just start with what COVID has been like for you guys at Bowlero, being able to keep your lanes open. Have you been able to, what kind of capacity you were able to operate at? And sort of as we sit here today with most of the country having lifted most of the restrictions, do you feel like you're back onto that, pre-COVID kind of runway for growth?
Sure. So, obviously early on, it was a very challenging time. We were shut down everywhere. But by the early part of May of 2020, we started to reopen in the markets where we could, beginning in Georgia and then expanding through much of the South and sort of following the regulatory framework. And, fast forward to where we are today, we have everything in our system other than 2 locations in Canada are currently open, and revenue has come back with a vengeance. So we're already doing more than all of the revenue that we were doing on a pre-pandemic basis when we look year over year for these weeks since the beginning of May.
And Brett, I have to applaud your team because your presentation was incredibly thorough. There is a real business here. This is not like other SPAC transactions. One slide in particular caught my attention. You expressed interest in the presentation on potentially forming a REIT. Now, how many properties, how much land do you in fact own, and how close are you to forming a REIT?
So the current number hasn't been disclosed. I don't think we're yet at enough critical mass to do it. We have some that we own today. We're primarily leased, but we do have a significant pipeline of acquisitions of individual centers that are coming on board, and more of those deals include land. So the thesis is that we will build to enough critical mass to potentially be able to spin that out as its own entity.
It's Julie here. I wanted to ask about sort of spending on those properties. Clearly, as we're showing for the pictures, and anybody who's been to a bowling alley in the last 10 years, we know it's not sort of the sticky floored bowling alleys of yore that I grew up with. So where are you in terms of capital spending, in terms of renovating bowling alleys, and sort of what your goals are on that front?
So as of today, we're in the right around 300 centers that we have in operation. Of those, about 120 look like the fully upgraded experience that you're showing on the screen. And then the balance are, I don't want to say untouched because we have spent money in them, but there's a lot of runway there to continue to bring those further up market. And as we do that, we dramatically increase the revenue and profitability, and the returns are explosive when we reinvest in our existing centers. And then it's a similar profile when we acquire a traditional center and make the same upgrades.
And then, Brett, another part of the business that you guys highlight in here is what you're doing with PBA, the Professional Bowling Association, and some of the media assets that are associated with that. How do you see that part of the business? Because, wholly owned leagues, I guess F1 is kind of the innovator here, but it's become a much more attractive part of the rights market, I guess, if we think about it that way, for investors, and certainly something I'm guessing you're going to talk quite a bit about on the roadshow.
Yeah, it is. And, the PBA is really an interesting thing for us because we acquired in 2019 with essentially a 2-part thesis. One is this can and should be a growing and profitable business as a standalone media property. And we're working very steadily towards that. And we've done a lot to add to the projection value. We set a new record in viewership. So we really moved that business forward. And then the second is it creates this flywheel of growth around the core business where viewers from the PBA, we have increased interest in bowling, which we can then use to drive them into our centers. And then when they're in our centers, we have the opportunity to create more viewers for the PBA. So that virtuous cycle just continues to spin and spin. So as a standalone business, it's a very nice media property to own, and I think it has a lot of upside. But its most significant dollar contribution, at least in the near term, will probably be in what it does to enhance the performance of the core business.
Brett, to moving forward, where does sports betting fit into your go forward plan?
So there's really two pieces to that. One is betting on the PBA, which is something that we launched this year in partnership with Fox Bet. And that looks much like betting on any other professional sports league. What's interesting is, being a stop and start league, there is an opportunity for a very significant number of bets per show, because as the data feeds mature, which is something that we're working on, you can go from betting on an entire event to betting on an individual game, to betting on a frame, to betting on a ball. So there's a lot of opportunity there. And then the second piece, as part of our longer term vision, is to integrate that activity as a game of skill into the centers themselves, so that the casual bowler has the opportunity to win real world prizes based on whether or not they can achieve a given thing. If we say, we'll give you X dollars if you can hit a strike, do you want to make that bet, that sort of thing. So those are two different pieces. One happens in the centers and one happens related to PBA, but both are vectors that we're looking at.
Well, Brett, Brian Sozzi tells us that he one time rolled a 300, so I don't think I'll be taking the other side. I won't be taking the other side of that strike bet for him. But we'll see. We'll see if we get the team out to a Bowlero lane for a little team outing sometime soon. Brett Parker, President CFO of Bowlero. Brett, appreciate the time this morning. I know we'll stay in touch as you guys get closer to consummating the deal, coming public, and then hopefully hit the quarterly circuit here for those updates. Yeah. Thanks for joining.
Great. Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me.